Dan McDermott is back from thechartguys.com. Dan, Happy New Year, Happy New Decade.
Thanks, James. Same to you. Glad to be back.
You bet. Dan, what are you seeing in the markets these days?
We've got some wild volatility thanks to the Middle Eastern crisis with Iran, and it has come out that the bulls are just fine. So we are continuing to monitor the daily uptrend, which has remained intact through it all. And that's keeping us in blue sky breakout with big tech leaders like Apple and Google leading the way forward. We've got cryptocurrency, Bitcoin's giving us a monthly higher low and looking at a little bit of upside. And we've got the MJ sector slightly shifting momentum. We see what is needed for the bulls to change the weekly trend on CGC and APHA. ACB, Aurora, keeps getting crushed and is one of the major bear leaders in the space, but a nice shakeup of things. Gold too. Gold went wild. So some very interesting volatility out there to start the year.
Yeah. To what extent do you think that volatility is solely the result of the geopolitical incident that characterized the end of last year and the beginning of this one involving Iran?
Oh, I'd say it's the vast majority of the reason. I mean, I'm sitting here watching the 5-minute time frames and seeing the news release come out, and I'm watching the S&P 500 dump. I'm watching oil shoot up, gold shoot up. Even Bitcoin started correlating with the news. It started acting similar to gold, and that's the first time. There was one other time in my 2.5 years of watching Bitcoin where I've noticed it correlated to broader economic factors, and this past week has been the second time I've ever noticed it.
Mm-hmm. So you trade Bitcoin frequently?
When the opportunity is there. I traded it all the time in 2017, often in 2018, less in 2019, and I've started this year with a few trades already.
And so what is your outlook for Bitcoin in 2019 or 2020 rather? I'm already living in the past from a technical perspective at this point.
So we're looking for a long-term monthly equilibrium, which is what you get equilibriums after significant volatility. So looking specifically, I'll show it in a chart in just a second, but from the move from 3,000 to 14,000, then we went down to 6,400, and now we're going to look to go back up towards 10,000. And I expect to see a monthly tightening range take place for the good first half of the year. And I expect that when that equilibrium breaks, we're going to have great volatility and a great longer term signal sometime in the second half of 2020.
Okay, so you approach Bitcoin not so much as a crypto enthusiast, but as just a technical trader because it's active and volatile and liquid.
Yep, otherwise I would be emotionally attached and I would have definitely given back tons of my cryptocurrency profit.
Right. I guess that's the secret for successful technical trading, is it? Remain emotionally detached.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Okay, so let's talk about the action a little bit in CGC. I mean, it's been up, it's been down, it's sort of looking a little bit better now. The incoming CEO hasn't really asserted any sort of message or direction for the company yet. The outgoing CEO didn't really, make any significant changes to the direction of the company in 2019. From a technical perspective, what are you liking about CGC's prospects for 2020 versus its more of its risks for a trader?
Well, right now we're on the verge of a weekly trend change, and I need to see a break of 22.25 and 22.8, I think it is. I'll have to double check that chart, but if we break those levels, that's the first weekly trend change that we've seen since we started pulling back the last 7 months and since we've been in a downtrend ever since. So that is the first start of a shift in sector sentiment that we will be looking for. And right now, we are literally just hovering under that level. And it's looking like the APHA earnings of FRIA, which are first thing next week, I believe Tuesday pre-market, may dictate short-term direction and dictate whether that resistance level. We'll have to see how correlated CGC is to the earnings reaction, but I expect a fairly significant correlation.
Mm-hmm. Are there any other large cannabis names that you are keeping an eye on?
Honestly, it's the weakest ones. So Aurora and Hexo and these names that are just in free fall, we know that to a certain degree, the sector is only as strong as its weakest names. That doesn't mean names can't go up while others are going down. But it just means if we're going to change the sector sentiment, if we're going to go from a bear market and utter despair for the last 7 months and shift to hope and some green, we have to see our weakest names find a bottom and start to shift as well. The biggest green days that we see in the MJ sector are when everybody across the board goes green. So if these names are continuing to fall with zero support and they're continuing to get downgraded by, like Aurora did just yesterday, it's going to continue to be a bit of a dark cloud overhanging the sector. So while I have no interest in playing those names bullish, I do know that I will need them to go bullish if my plays that I am looking forward to be bullish on, which is Canopy and Afria, I need to see the entire sector start to shift its momentum and find bottoms.
I guess to some extent, the next reporting quarters of the likes of Canopy and Afria are going to inform the direction of the entire sector. If they report earnings that surprise to the upside, obviously the reversal to the upside could be expected to strengthen, but if they again disappoint or warn for future earnings, then it could actually have an accelerating factor on the downward trend. Do you have any sort of expectation of that in the next earnings cycle of these companies?
Not really. I have been poking around with Afria because it has responded bullish the last 2 times to its earnings, but doing a very brief superficial fundamental analysis and having some help with some other people pointing things out, their previous quarters appear a bit inflated because they were showing some gains on some investment, and we're anticipating this coming quarter that those are now going to be inhibiting the profit, the underlying returns. So that may be a little bit of a shock to the market who's looking for these numbers to continue, but maybe now. It really goes back to what we talked about with Trulieve and how you were pointing out that they were doing some things with their numbers that maybe were not going to be there the next coming quarter. And that's something we're watching for. Honestly, it's still just technical levels for me where I have to see these weekly trends change, because if we do not get these weekly trends changing, we know that these bulls are just going to continue to be at the mercy of the bears.
Yeah, you bet. All right, Dan, walk us through some of this explanation in chart form.
So here's some of the longer term charts we're looking at. Starting off with Bitcoin, we're looking at the low of the prolonged pullback down in the $3,000 range, our top just under 14,000, and we've been scouting for this monthly higher low to form after about 6-7 months of pullback. It looks like that monthly higher low has formed now at 64.30, and we're going to be looking for the bulls to set a monthly lower high. The bulls want to make their way up towards the 10,000 level or beyond to give themselves adequate space within this equilibrium. Ideally, I would say the bulls want to make their way, pretty much just break that 10,000 level. We'll look for a lower high, and then we would look for a higher low into the middle of the year. That being said, we do still need more bull follow through at this point. Last case that the bulls want to see, worst case scenario, would be just a very weak bounce and then a drop to a lower low under 64.30. So need to keep the uptrend intact at this point, the daily uptrend. Just looking for a higher low right now, so no real red flags there. But if we were to lose the daily uptrend from here, again, cautious because this monthly chart needs more follow through. So onto the MJ sector, weekly time frames. So this is what we're looking at from our low, top of the bounce, higher low, and now we must break 22.25, and then right behind it is 22.48. These two resistance levels breaking would again be the first time that we've seen a weekly trend change since we started pulling back hard from 52.74. You can see every little bounce attempt was just a lower high. So it would be notable, but again, the burden of proof is on the bulls right now. Show us something, change this trend. If they don't, the weekly lower high pattern continues and the bears keep their control. The other name that is similar to this setup is APHA on its weekly chart with our low, high, higher low, and the bulls need to break 561. So APHA at this point needs about a 18% move to break resistance, whereas CGC only needs about, less than that, maybe 6-7% or so. So closer for CGC bulls. And if you pull up other names, obviously ACB is nowhere near breaking resistance, and Cron, not as clear a setup on its weekly time frame. Cron's really just been trading sideways the last couple of months, and did not see as significant a bounce to create the potential trend change scenario like those other names have. So that's what's most important for me here in Q1 2020, and knowing that Afria's earnings are so close, just a few days away, I know that that may have a significant impact as to whether or not these resistance levels are able to break or not.
All right, Dan, thanks very much for your contribution as usual. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, James. See you next time.